Hey, so this is a brief lesson on thoughts and how they manifest into our reality and how we can manage them in ways that it will be to our benefit. So imagine this right here. This is your brain or your mind. And this right here is thoughts coming into your mind. Okay? The thing about it is, we get thoughts all the time. These thoughts always are constantly coming in our mind. And rarely do we have the awareness or the mind frame to examine these thoughts. Hold it right before it goes in, right before we start giving it energy. Because thoughts are just entities that are just waiting for pieces of your subconscious so it can grow. It's basically wants to use your subconscious, your conscious mind, your consciousness to grow into whatever in the physical reality. But sometimes thoughts that come in are not from us. Thoughts that are from a different origin. So what do we do? Well, when a thought comes in, we should identify that this is a thought coming in to our mind, right? Hold it right there. Examine it. We're going to look at these thoughts. Okay? You got a little magnifying glass. All right? We're going to look at these thoughts through much scrutiny. One, we want to figure out if this thought even came from our mind. Sometimes we get thoughts all the time that just randomly exist in your mind, just pop up in your mind, and it's not even from us. So we want to see the origin of the thought. Okay? We want to see this origin. Where did it come from? All right? And then once we figure out the origin, we want to figure out the level of virtue. How virtuous is this thought? Will it bring much value to me? Will it bring much virtue in my life? Or is it a thought of senseless thoughts? Will it bring low virtue or no virtue at all? So if the thought comes from somewhere else, right? So this is somewhere else, right here, SWF or E, excuse me, and then your own mind, YOM. So if it comes from somewhere else, but it has a high level of virtue, we can choose at that point that this thought, even though it didn't come from us, it is still worthy to be processed or worthy to have a piece of your consciousness. It's really important for us to look at our consciousness and value it, because we drain it and we give pieces of it to thoughts that are low virtue, that could have came from somewhere else but are low virtue, or that came from you and are low virtue. Okay? Now, if these thoughts came from you and are low virtue, that right there should be an indicator that I need to check on the way that I program my mind to think. Right? Obviously, you have a low virtue thought that came from yourself. Right? So there's a possibility that your mind has been programmed to perceive something or to focus on something that is of a lower virtue. Right? So once the thought is in the mind, before we even get there, we need to figure out how our mind is operating. Is it operating on a lower or negative I was going to say aspect. I guess we just put aspect. I don't even know if that's the right terminology. Or is it on a higher? Get my handwriting, I'm falling asleep. Or positive aspect. Clues like this are given when we see someone that always are talking negative all the time, or always perceive something as negative or bad. That person's mind has been programmed to process things in a lower virtue or a negative aspect, thus creating wherever something that could be from a high level of virtue, and you process it in the mind. Since the mind is on a lower or negative aspect, how it processes things, the high virtue thing will be watered down and pretty much not used at its full potential or value. Okay. So from there, after we process this thought is going in here, is processing. Depending on the way our mind is programmed to process, because it's programmed through life experiences, where we taught, family, environment, other external stimuli. From there, we'll birth a perception. Okay. A perception will be born. Now, this is your reality. So once the thought has been processed, once it gets to here, your reality has been created. Okay. Your perception is your belief. A kid didn't know about volcanoes until it was in class and learned that volcanoes are real and they can hot magma comes out of it. But until that moment, when that kid was in class, volcanoes did not exist to that kid. It was not in his or her reality, simply because of the awareness wasn't there. Okay. So the perception is, once we perceive something, it becomes our reality. Okay. Now, once we perceive something, depending on how we perceive it, it's depending on what emotion is going to follow afterwards. Okay. Emotions are powerful. At this particular point, we are emitting frequencies out into the universe. So we are creating a physical reaction. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So at this point, we are causing ripples in the universe without us even knowing it or seeing it. So after the emotion, we start to feel something. The feeling. How many times have we heard, I didn't feel like doing that? But why you do that? Because I felt like it. Right? The feeling is what is the actual physical energy or manifestation of the emotion that drives us to make our choice. Okay? Drives us to make our choice. Now, for instance, say if there's Bob and here's Sally. They both got fired from the same job, from the same exact pay. They have the same exact amount of family members. Pretty much their life is just the same exact. The only difference is that Bob and Sally mind is programmed differently, right? So Bob gets the news. Bob, you're fired. What? See, he gets the information was given to him from somewhere else. Wasn't his thought, and it was a lower virtue, right? He lost his job. Could be of higher virtue if you think of it, if the job was bad, but if he's upset, it probably was a lower virtue, right? But this is something he has to experience. He has to go through. There's nothing that he can't just not think about. So he decides to process it. So he's processing in his mind, but he's a person that always thinks that everything is always happening to him. The world is just shit. Nothing works right. Blah, 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 blah. This is a sign that he needs to give up. And he has processed all that. So the perception he got in here that it's he needs to give up. The world is against him. Oops, sorry, I'm dyslexic. I write out of sync sometimes. Against him. Okay. So he has that. So with a perception like he wants to give up, the world is against him, what kind of emotion would that emit? He wants to give up. Sadness, despair. The world is against him. Loneliness, depression. Those are all different types of emotion that could be associated with that perception, right? So he's feeling that perception, sadness, or let's just say he gets angry. He's upset, all right? So he perceived that everyone's against him, so he got angry. Like it's just me against the world, Tupac. So his emotion is angry, right? So from there, he starts to feel. When you get angry, you feel your blood boiling. It's just boiling and boiling and boiling. So what do you normally do? When people get angry, their blood is boiling, they feel that anger, they normally act in a response in a way that is aggressive. They do things, they grab stuff aggressively, they talk aggressively, they move aggressively. So say that Bob here gets the feeling, and he gets in his car and he decides his choice is he's angry, so I'm about to drive my car off real fast so everyone can hear that I'm upset. Driving out this parking lot, they gonna fire me, right? So he's just driving down the street, just angry, turn up the radio, mad, and then all of a sudden he looks up and he noticed that he wasn't paying attention and has to swerve out the way. So he swerves out the way of his one car. And swerves into the other lane and hits another car dead on, right? Dead on, or we're gonna say head-on collision. Okay. Now here's Sally. Sally is the most brightest person in the world. She's just a light to everyone. Everyone loves her. Everyone loves being around her. Sally gets the lower virtue news that her job is ending today, right? And Sally is a person that sees, okay, my job is ending. I see that all things happen as it should. I accept. I may not know why this is happening, but I know it's happening for a greater reason. So instead of processing in a way that it was negative, because she's already, her mind is already programmed to think in a positive way. It thinks in a positive way. So what she says, it was, all things are meant to happen the way that it should. All things happen as it should. Okay? All things happen as it should. I hope you can read this. This looks terrible right now. All things happen as it should. That's how she perceives it. So that is going to be the emotion of acceptance. Okay? Acceptance is it's higher than mutual, but you are being present, you're allowing things to flow in, you're taking things in. So what that means is what you will feel is peace. You'll feel that peace. You'll feel that peace because you accepted all the events that occurred. So you would choose to drive like you normally would. Not fast out the parking lot, not driving, not listening to music, not yelling, not doing none of that, and paying complete attention to the road. Thus, not having a need to swerve out the way of a vehicle and crash into another one head-on collision. So, her result, she made it home safely. Now that's just a brief thing. I'm gonna go just a little bit deeper here in a second. Gotta erase a little bit, and wish I had a bigger eraser. Okay, hold on a second. All right. Okay, so now here's another thing about a certain thing about vibrations, about knowing what we are vibrating. Okay, of course, every emotion has a different frequency to it, right? But knowing when we change our vibration on how to get it back. Sometimes we get ourselves in a perception that is toxic. So how do we get ourselves out of that? How do we get ourselves out of that feeling before we make that bad choice? Well, the human mind has 3 patterns of thinking. Can you guess what that is?
Let me guess. Is it the past?
Yes, it's the past. Oops, it's the past.
Oh yeah, so it must be the present.
Yep, you are intelligent. The present
And the future.
Yes, the future / imagination. Because we can imagine some things that are supposed to happen or things that we just want to create. So there's 3 different patterns of thinking in which the human mind can think. The past, the present, or the future / imagination. Right? Because the future is an imagination because we don't know what's going to happen. So whenever we have an experience of some sort that cause us to vibrate differently, the first thing we should notice is that our feeling changes. Someone says something derogatory towards you, you will start to, most of the time you feel it in your heart space or your solar plexus, either one, but your feeling changes. Okay, your feeling changes. What you feel is no longer what it was before. That right there, it's like, for instance, if there was a metal rod, say this is a metal rod here, and this thing is just vibrating, wow, 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 right? And then you place your hand on it, okay? And you're just holding this metal rod, and it's just vibrating, wow, 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 while you're holding it. You can feel every time it vibrates, wow, 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 wow. Now, if it changes, wow, 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 you will still feel the change in the vibration. The same thing is how we feel. When we feel differently, that's the change in vibration. So that is a clue that our vibrational level has changed. The second thing is our thoughts. The thoughts changed. Noticing a thoughts, having a great day, good thoughts, and then it can be shifted to thoughts that are lower virtue. Just noticing the difference in virtue of the thoughts you had before versus the one you have now is really key. All right. So pretty much from there, once we figured out our feelings changed and our thoughts have changed, all right, well, let's figure out how to change this vibration. Okay, so if this is something that was triggered from a thought from the past, then at that particular point, we can choose a different pattern of thinking and go to the present. Be present. Or we can go to the future imagination. Or we can go to the back and stay in the past and go to a pleasant memory. It's right there. We have the choice of choosing a different pattern of thinking that will allow us to enter a mind space that will give us a higher and more significant virtue of thoughts or thinking.